Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick and welcome to my channel. Today's tutorial is on periodization. Periodization is a term that we apply in training to give people a template of how they're going to be expecting their training schedule for the next few weeks to months. Now, don't worry about the word. The idea is just that we don't willy-nilly decide to push people as hard as possible and just make them exercise and eat less, and then I'll see you in a couple months. There has to be a template, or at least a framework for developing an idea or a strategy for people. And that motivation sometimes waxes and wanes different parts of the year, death anniversaries, challenges, taxes, cold weather like now, although it's sunny, it's cold outside and nobody wants to go out. Yesterday it was raining all day, it was muddy, it was cold. The motivation goes downhill. As coaches and doctors, you have to expect that people will sometimes tap out. If they tap out, it's important to embrace that and maybe consider supporting that person during the times when they're low, when motivation fails or it's waning. And during those times, it's really important to have a coach that can articulate a way to supplant that time period. It's not just to pull back, watch Netflix, and sit on the couch with a blanket for 3 months and then come out the other side and continue where you left off, because stagnation will bring on pain. If you already have a disease process, it'll bring on more pain and injury and possibly more disease. For example, if you're a diabetic and you have a very high, what's called a hemoglobin A1C, or your insulin in the morning is really high, meaning you're insulin resistant. The longer you wait to intervene with medicines or lifestyle change, the more damage you will accumulate. And if you decide that I'm not going to do anything right now because I'm really busy and my parents are going through a divorce, my kid has a disease process that we have to make it through, that's fine. But just understand this, the longer you wait, the worse the disease gets. So that when you are ready to attack it with the help of your alternative medicine doctor or your Western medicine doctor or your coach or your chef, it will be much harder to reverse at that point in time. Sometimes, like with osteopenia going to osteoporosis, meaning thin bone going to damaged bone, it will be irreversible. A heart attack is irreversible, but narrowing of the arteries can be reversible before the heart attack sets in. So it's really important to understand that disease can progress. You might not feel it. It might all be in your imaging studies, in your blood tests, in your aches and pains, your suffering, your barometer for the day. Oh, it's cold outside. My knees are killing me. I'm not going outside. Fair. But as time goes by, the caveat is we get used to that pain. We get used to moving slower. We get used to our little things that we take on to get us through the day. You take on so many little things to adjust and use to get through the day, to adapt to your aches and pains that have accumulated slowly, that you don't even realize, man, I got like 20 things I'm doing now versus nothing about 10 years ago. Unless you have a picture before and after, it's hard to recognize those techniques that you've adopted or the weight that you have gained until you see it in pictures and other people that you haven't seen in a decade say, hey, you look great, or hey, what happened to you? When people lose weight, the typical response is either, wow, what did you do? You look fantastic. Or, are you okay? This is why I'd like to consider having my patients and my clients go through and invest in a long-term timeline. As an athlete, you would probably want your training team to challenge you and develop strength, muscle size, and performance. As a non-athlete, you're probably not worried about all those other bullet points. You just want to challenge weight, medical disease, and lifestyle. Everybody knows weight. And just like I alluded to, when you cut calories, you can lose weight. But the problem is you will lose weight in the form of fat and muscle. And when you lose more muscle, you will usually look gaunt. That's when you look sick, too skinny. Most people, when they go into a caloric deficit for a short amount of time, will suffer. They'll suffer, they'll deal with the hunger, and they'll usually be able to do it if they have a big enough inspiration at the end of that suffering, like a wedding or a class reunion. So when they're doing that, they have that mark, that benchmark that they keep on alluding to, and it makes them stay in the game without tapping out. But then after they hit that mark, the challenge, the competition, it's all hands in the air, go back to eating like before, unless you have another daisy chain goal to take on after that. And that brings on the Biggest Loser phenomenon, where people were studied in the show called The Biggest Loser. If you've never seen it before, that's where coaches bark at their clients and they try to get them to eat just a morsel of food every day, and essentially they're exercising all day long. And the cameras follow them as they go through the ordeal of caloric restriction and aggressive exercise. And there's always going to be that person that is very emotionally upset, that just taps out, because that's what happens when you're used to 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day and you go down to less than 1,000, and then you adapt a whole bunch of activity and caloric burn. That is tough. If you're not an athlete and you're also obese, or you also have problems with joint pain and back pain, and you're forced to do that, it's really tough to make it through. And some people will quit. Some people will use the idea that they're going to win $1 million and they'll keep on with it because they have a good chance. But if you look at what happens in the next seasons, they never bring on the previous winners, because most of them gain more weight than they started with, because their metabolism adjusts to such a caloric deficit. If they get into a point of severe starvation, the metabolism, if it's given a chance, will be able to correct itself. Even though you might be going from 3,000 to 1,000 calories, which is a severe drop, your body will try to defend by readjusting metabolism to say, okay, we'll just be better at extracting every bit of nutrition from that 1,000. You get better with digestion. You get better with extracting calories from a little bit of food every day. So that if you go back to the previous volume that you ate, you gain even more weight than before, because you're so good at extracting every little calorie. So that's what happens when you don't train properly and you're not ready for that metabolic shifting or adaptation. And that's why it's important to vacillate. That's the way I do it. I vacillate between the exercises. Over the last few decades, there has been essentially 3 different types of periodization models or training models. One is linear, when you just have a coach design something where you keep on building your endurance, strength, or power, or hypertrophy, and the training to get to that end goal in 3 to 6 months. Also, for those of you who subscribe to my channel or like hiking, check out my Facebook Dr. Rick Hiking Excursions, because I'm taking anybody that wants to come, as long as you train, to Bryce Canyon in April 2022. And we will be meeting in Illinois once to twice a month to do some training, long hikes locally, in anticipation that we'll have something cool to get to. And Bryce Canyon is not the 14,000 feet that I take people in Colorado to. It's a nice undulating track, or at least a vista that is probably at the worst 7 miles. But there's something about Bryce Canyon in the morning, maybe a dusting of snow, that is just so beautiful. Nowhere else on the planet Earth does the landscape look like that. Anyway, if you want to go or you're interested, check out Facebook, Dr. Rick Hiking Excursions. I'll spell it down below, and consider going. And I'll be announcing as we get closer to 2022 and April, more details coming up. And don't forget, if you think that my video today helps you, or you think you know somebody who might benefit from it, share this with them. It helps the YouTube algorithm so I can produce more of these videos. All these things I put together to help my patients, clients, and subscribers lead a healthier lifestyle. So please hit a thumbs up. It'll help with the algorithm. Going back to the types of periodization, there's linear, where you just accelerate as you go forward until you hit goal. There's also alternating, where you have a challenge and you take it easy and recover. And you have another challenge, take it easy and recover. A bigger challenge and you go back and forth. But it really has to be designed with a coach every week moving forward, because some people have challenges, I guess you can say, or injuries, or some people work with physical therapists and trainers. Some people have to work with a nutritionist and a trainer. Some people have obligations and they can't always be around. They travel a distance. They have to come back to the area to prove their performance or their improvements since last time. My particular form of training is undulating. I think varying week to week or day to day, workout to workout is really dependent on your experience. I can do it because I can tell that either I am a little bit too sore or I'm not sore enough. With the journaling I do in my mind, I can remember when I went heavy, how my legs were, when I did legs, when I did upper body, if I'm having problems with shoulders again, if my legs are getting a little bit on the thin side. So I can kind of take a snapshot evaluation of my performance, how I'm feeling now, what I did in the last week or 2 weeks, and then change my workout on the fly. Now, if you're not that advanced, you really have to have somebody design that for you. I have several patients that usually come into the office wanting to make an aggressive lifestyle change and just saying, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But you got to realize I can't be with my patients in the office every week. That just doesn't fit the schedule because other people have to come in and I'm sure patients have to pay a copay. Even HMO has to pay a copay and they probably don't want to do that. So that's why I usually say you have to have a trainer because somebody's got to be in the trenches with you. And that usually at first is a deal breaker. One way or another, it's going to cost money. The idea where you just have a cookie cutter plan applied to your next 4 to 5 months is probably not going to work for you. It typically does not hold any water. When somebody is told to tolerate their own pain, that's very subjective. And all humans are built so that they're not supposed to like pain. In fact, pain is supposed to be a hindrance to anybody because we're supposed to move away from pain and we're supposed to move toward joy. Those are the basic building blocks of an animal, of any living being. So it's counterintuitive when your coach tells you, I want you to do this and you're going to be in 2 days of pain. If you're not an athlete, and or you have knee pain, or you have a history of back pain, and you walk around with a little bit of a limp, or your back flare up isn't as bad as it usually is, but you have back pain, just a little bit. You triggered the back spasm to come back a little bit because you worked out. You did deadlifts, or you did a squat, or you did overhead press for the first time without support, and your back's a little bit painful. Sometimes it will bring your memory right back to when you were injured 10 years ago, when you had a slip disc. And believe it or not, the memory of that injury from 10 years ago, even though today it's just a little bit mild, will make you walk around like an old person, just like you did 10 years ago, because you know that you don't want it to get any worse. But yet it's only induced because you started to break into exercise again. You started to turn on muscle that hasn't been turned on in a while. And this is a typical phenomenon of what happens in physical therapy. If I can get somebody that hasn't exercised in a long time and I can convince them to see a physical therapist again, and they have a back surgery, a failed back syndrome, and I say, you know what, I can get you acupuncture to calm things down, but I want you to work on your core because I test out their core strength, their abdominal strength, and they can't even lift their legs off of the table. Well, if you have back pain and a slip disc and you can't lift your legs off the table, I think we have to work on core because the likelihood of having another slip disc, a level up or a level down, is high. And if you don't work on core because it hurts, that disc is coming sooner than later. So counterintuitive again, the idea is not to be lackadaisical and not do anything. The idea is to lean into a little bit of movement, a little bit of muscle stimulation, but not enough to cause a bad flare-up. The idea is to induce a little bit of workout pain, but not to the degree of what the pain was when you had the injury the first time, whether it's back pain, shoulder pain, injury to the neck or knees, but enough just to tell the muscle, this is what we're going to do. Here's a taste, but we're not going to do too much more. So recover. So that's that Goldilocks window. There's this thing called delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS. And delayed onset muscle soreness is this phenomenon where everybody that exercises knows that there's going to be some payback after they get through that gauntlet of pain. There's going to be muscle aches. You're going to walk around like John Wayne. I'm probably showing my age, but John Wayne is an old movie star that used to do a lot of Westerns, and he'd always walk around like this. And if you've ever done resistance exercise, did heavy squat day, or did deadlifts, the day after, you're going to expect a little bit of muscle soreness and stiffness, and you're usually going to walk around like this. Is that painful? Yes, it's a little bit achy, enough to remind you with movement that you just worked out yesterday, but not enough to be in severe pain 10 out of 10. So has athletes or amateur working class non-athletes that are trying to get lifestyle change to lose weight and have longevity, we get used to anticipating that there's going to be pain. We also get used to liking the small amount of pain that comes after a decent workout. In fact, that's how we throttle the workout. Eventually, when you become more expert at knowing how to exercise, you'll be able to do your own undulating periodization. But until then, you have to get feedback. You have to maybe in the beginning have something of a rescue, whether the rescue is a chiropractor, a massage therapist, an acupuncturist, or medicines or herbs. There should be a rescue because you want to swarm your body with the rescue in the first few days after a workout. And that's why you have to have a trainer, coach, a doctor, know that it might happen and be able to save you in case you do flare up aggressively. So if you don't flare up aggressively, even better, but you have to march your way through. So if this is the first time you're doing an exercise routine, one of the things a good trainer, coach, or doctor will do is journal, track, record, and review. And it's important to do all these things because, for example, if you work out heavy or for the first time on Monday, you observe what happens on Tuesday and Wednesday. It typically takes 48 hours for delayed onset muscle soreness to go away. But if this is the first time, you might have to give an extra day, maybe 72 hours, Thursday, before you reintroduce the exercise on Friday. But you have to wait until all pain is to a tolerable level before you attack and reintroduce the same movement again. For fear that if you do the movement again and work the same muscle groups, that if they haven't recuperated, that you can actually hinder the building up of tolerance, strength, or hypertrophy. Because if a muscle fiber is still inflamed and then you add more work to an already inflamed, not 100% healed muscle, you'll actually cause more damage. When you first start out, or as you advance, if you know that a certain body part movement or a certain hill that you attacked if you're a runner, or a certain distance or gear that you used if you're a cyclist, if you know that that took a week to recover, then you might not want to hit that hill again, or that gear again, or ride with that group again, or work out with that guy again, because it was a little bit too much until later. You develop a little more endurance, you train a little differently, you cross-train, and then you return to that when you're ready for it next time. If you go back into that kind of training again, the chances for overuse again are going to be higher. The more times you have overuse, the higher probability for tearing a muscle, and then you're going to see one of us sports medicine doctors for either a surgery or an injection. Injury is demotivating. Anybody who's had an injury, especially when they're about to hit their plateau, knows how demotivating it is, and everybody remembers that time. You're going to have to invest sometime. Whether your medicines and or your surgical procedures are postponing when you have to invest, that stuff only gives you a temporary respite. All the medicines in the world can change around the metrics that the doctor says. You got to lower your cholesterol, you got to lower your insulin level, and that's fine. Or you have to reduce the cancer size. That's all fine if you get hit with medicines and procedures. But honestly, the miracle is here. Even if we give you help with medicines and procedures, if you don't give the body what it needs, it will continue down the path. The medicines and procedures are just slowing down the speed at which you continue. So for those of you who don't want to invest in exercise, that's fine. But remember, disease is demotivating. The more diseases you have, I've done this many times in the office. I have a patient that comes in just when they are in control of one disease because we got the medicines all dialed in or the physical therapy is finally working. I find another disease and I have to tell them in the office, congratulations on the control of your pain. We dialed it in with the right morphine or the right narcotic, the right muscle relaxer, the right anti-inflammatory, the right injection, but now I found something else. It's so deflating. I can see the spirit in somebody just go, ugh, not again. And I feel so terrible when I have to unload that on somebody and then I have to have the same conversation again. Well, we can give you the medicines or you can try to change your sleep, change your exercise, change your nutrition, and develop some form of mindful practice. And then it always goes back to, if it's that same person, it always goes back to, well, I don't have the money, or I don't feel like dieting right now, or I tried that before and physical therapy sucks. Well, yeah, it always sucks. I don't want to exercise. I can't afford a gym. It's COVID. I can't afford organic. I try to meditate, but I am too anxious. Well, shit, do something about it. Unless you want, I can't just give you more medicines. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get pissed off, but it's so frustrating as a doctor when I can see the rescue temporarily when I give medicines, and it's beautiful when I see people come in as a follow-up and they're doing great. You can see the shine, you can see the smile, you can see the suffering stop, and then you have to give the news, okay, the next stage of this treatment plan is to move, to change, to do the lifestyle commitment stuff. And then it's like, do I have to? Yeah, you have to. So I think that unfortunately we probably as doctors disempower people because we train people to just take medicines all the time and not worry about lifestyle. A baby or an infant, if you train that infant to, whenever they cry, to always go into the room and sleep with them, they are never going to learn to sleep on their own. And in fact, they'll just, it's kind of dark in here. I'm lonely, I'm hungry. I'll just cry because every time I cry, my dad and mom come in. Wah! And then suddenly the door opens up and then the parent comes in. And then if the parent leaves, I'll just cry again. They'll come right back in. Watch this trick. Wah! And then the parent comes back in. So just like that negative feedback, and don't get me wrong, I'll probably talk about that at a later video, but there are times when you want to stay with your kid, and family bedding or family sleeping is fine. But I think there comes a point when you got to get some hours and you have to have independence. It's not for everybody, not for every family, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about, especially parents that have to wake up at 5 in the morning and work 12 hours. You got to take turns, but ideally you want to be able to have your child sleep eventually on his own, on her own. And sometimes the behavior pattern of getting a child to sleep on their own is a little tough. And there's been arguments in families and in the medical community about what's proper or not. The bottom line is that when you have a parent that is just coming in with baggy eyes and the kid can't sleep alone, or the parent taps out and just puts the kid in the bed, there's challenges to that. There's also challenges to lifestyle change. So I'm just trying to bring it around and make it recognizable and make it something that you can understand as far as lifestyle change and what we see in the office. One thing is for sure, when you feel bliss, you will be motivated. And bliss, I think, can be explained in the post-orgasmic feeling. And those of you who that rubs the wrong way, think of it this way. Think of it this way. After you come back from a vacation, or if you've ever seen, if those of you who haven't been on vacation, you need a vacation. But if you've ever been in an office where somebody comes back from vacation and all they're doing is they're smiling, there's an aura around them, they're showing pictures or they're showing you their phone, they're showing the beach and they can't stop. And even 3 days later or a week later, they're still showing you stuff that they remember and they're flying and their productivity is great. That's because they just came back from a week of serotonin and oxytocin. Those are two of the love hormones that get released during bliss. And those are the same hormones that get released during orgasm. In fact, during an orgasm, they are at maximum levels. You can also have endorphin and enkephalin be about the same during exercise, but they come up and they come back down. During an orgasm, they come up, they stay up for a while. During a vacation, especially if the vacation is great for a couple of days, they come up and they stay high for a while. They can stay high for a while, so much so that if the person that was on vacation just looks at a picture or hears sound, like a sound machine reflecting waves, they'll be right back into the beach where they were just at. And the serotonin levels will pump up again. So that's annoying if you haven't been to the vacation, but it also tells you about the power of hormones. And those same hormones are anti-inflammatory. Those same hormones are motivating to drive you into investing more exercise. Those same hormones are motivating to say, hey, listen, don't eat that food yet because you're going to not feel this way. You're not going to feel cool anymore if you eat that food, if you drink that beer, if you engage in staying up late. You're not going to feel this good anymore, so stay on task. And that's where a coach will probably be very helpful. For those of you who haven't been on vacation, for those of you who haven't exercised before, for those of you who haven't negotiated how to push exercise right to the point of a little bit of delayed onset muscle soreness and then pull back a little bit, it's going to be hard to fathom how aggressive to go or what to do over the course of 5 to 7 months. But that's why you have to have somebody map it out for you, because it's nice to have predictability. If you just use somebody's pre-calculated formula and you're going to guess that you're going to lose 1 pound to 2 pounds a week until you hit a maximum of 100 pounds off in a couple weeks, I mean, God bless you if it works, but typically that doesn't work because things get in the way. There's a lot of speed bumps that get in the way that aren't calculated when somebody puts together the general algorithm or formula. So that's why you have to have a coach that knows the complications that can be anticipated, and they can navigate around those speed bumps. It's nice to anticipate those things. It's nice to know some rescues if you do hit a speed bump. It's nice to know some rescues to deploy before you even hit the speed bump. If you have a weak core, if you have a bad shoulder, if you know a calorie deficit's going to bring on tremor or bad cramps or a headache, then it's nice to know don't dive below that deck. Just go 10 or 20 calories above that deck and know how to do that properly, but in a sustainable fashion. You've just increased your chances of success. The higher probability of success and the higher probability of predicted weight loss and gains in muscle and gains in strength, maybe even hypertrophy for those of you who want muscle mass. I think that it's very motivating to see when the formula actually works versus you're investing in all this, nothing's moving, your bloat is still there, your belly's still the same, the scale is still the same, and you're able to lift, but you're not able to move any more weight. Why is that? Well, maybe you're doing it the wrong way. Maybe the formula isn't yours. Maybe there's something in your makeup that requires a different formula. Most Americans probably eat too much. And if you are obese, there's many reasons for obesity, but if you are obese or overweight, then the likelihood is if you go into a caloric deficit, you'll probably lose weight. If you go into a fast, if you change around your macronutrients, you'll probably lose weight. The question is, what kind of weight will you lose? The key in weight loss is to lose fat and not lose muscle. You don't have to be muscular. You don't have to be a bodybuilder. You can actually be an average Joe or Jane. But if you lose weight and it includes fat and muscle, the only thing you're going to come up with is a lower number on the scale, but a weaker body. If you're light and weak, the likelihood is that your scale will be good, but you're still going to feel the same suffering. Because remember, when you're trying to lose weight to take the pressure off your knees, to help your low back pain, to help take that concrete suit off. A lot of people that are overweight or obese, they feel like they're wearing a concrete suit every morning because they got to walk around like John Wayne, like I was alluding to. Now, that's not working out, John Wayne. That's just John Wayne because they're so heavy. Or they're edematous. When you lose total weight because you've just hit a calorie deficit from whatever you're used to, and you don't do any exercise, you just cut back on calories, then your body will go into starvation and it will start to eat the fat, but it will also mistakenly start to eat the protein, your muscle. So that's why people will say, are you okay? It's because you'll lose tummy size, but you'll also lose a lot of facial muscle. You'll also lose a lot of neck muscle. You'll lose a lot of girth in the shoulders. You don't want to do that. Muscle strength is important to maintain what little you have of core strength, of endurance to walk, so that you can take the next step or the next level of training, which would be implementing or sprinkling in a little bit of exercise. When you initiate a little bit of weight loss from caloric deficit, if you are calorically surplused, then it's good to lose some weight, some fat, but you also want to then start to exercise or to give muscle the stimulation it needs, the signal it needs to grow. Actin and myosin are two different muscle fibers that everybody has. And when contraction occurs, like the contraction of a big muscle, skeletal muscle, they cause movement. And when movement occurs, you have either a joint move or you have a muscle burn. You have a muscle work. And that's why muscles can be the best form of metabolic sinks. If you have a cholesterol issue or if you have an overabundance of glucose, it means diabetes, or triglycerides are super high, the best thing that you can do is obviously avoid overeating and maybe a caloric deficit, but building up muscle. Between all different types of exercises, resistance exercise and growing muscle or having muscle very efficient will be the best way to lower your glucose, lower your cholesterol, lower your triglycerides, because the muscles work to eat all those products. Those products are supposed to be building blocks for energy. You can turn on digestion, you can make your brain think, but that's kind of involuntary. What you can do voluntarily every day is move. And when you move, you burn. When you burn, you take care of utilizing all those resources. And if you have an overabundance of resources, meaning your cholesterol is high, your glucose is high, your triglyceride is high, then you should be doing extra movement. You shouldn't be just taking niacin or cholesterol-lowering medicines or diabetes medicines. I mean, it's important to do that if you have a disease process out of control, but it's also important to do the natural things, controlling what you eat and also controlling how you burn it. And that's why I would always ask, I don't care what sex you are, I don't care how old you are, it's important to maintain muscle bulk, muscle endurance, muscle strength, muscle power, because mobility gives you independence. Being able to drive and hold shoulders up, or being able to lift overhead, or being able to come up from a chair, being able to get off of a toilet on your own, that's all independence. Being able to take toilet paper and wipe your own butt, that's independent. If you can't do that stuff, can't dress yourself, can't put your fingers together because you have arthritis that's severe, then you can't live independently. You've already lost that element and you're on your way to a shortened lifestyle. The statistics show that when people break hips, I don't care how healthy they are, but when they break hips, mortality comes faster because they lose independence. Nowadays, I think that you can fix a hip almost immediately. You put somebody into the hospital, you put a piece of metal as a new hip, they should be able to hobble in and walk out. The problem is if you have somebody that's totally osteoporotic and the bone won't hold the metal, how good are you going to get? But my point is that when you lose mobility and muscle strength, you lose independence. And are you going to start your rehab process at that point in time when the stroke occurs? You're going to have to do it when the stroke occurs. Are you going to do it after you've lost half of your body strength from the heart attack? Are you going to do it after the chemotherapy? It's a little bit too late. Are you going to do it after you're declared severe diabetic on insulin? That's never too late, but if you're like this big and your knees are gone, you're not going to be motivated to exercise because it's going to hurt so much. So I'm not pointing the finger at my heart attack victims, my cancer victims, my stroke victims, or my obese patients. I'm just trying to tell you what I see happens to everybody that postpones their investment. I'm trying to stay ahead of the game, and it's not that I don't like exercise, but I don't spend a lot of time doing it. So I've gotten to the point where I can just spend about 15 minutes, 3 to 4 days a week in the gym or here at home to exercise, and that's all I need with the undulating practice of periodization that I use. Now, I'm not suggesting you do this. Maybe if you're more advanced, or if you're, a lot of my cyclists are really in good shape. My runners are really in good shape. I just like to have my cyclists and my runners work on upper body too. because you're not doing that. But I think a well-rounded individual is important, just like I should be doing running and cycling, which I am. So it's important to do a whole plethora of different things and be well-versed. I think being well-versed in anything will give you a higher likelihood of longevity. Now, you don't have to be a bodybuilder. I think it does help to be an athlete from before, or to pull on those heartstrings from before, if you can, and adapt. I don't like spending hours in the gym. I don't have time to do that. I'm on the computer trying to take care of patients for the next day, the next week, or the ones that I'm communicating with from the week before. So even though I have weights here, I hate working out at home. It's really boring. So those of you who have equipment at home, I only save the equipment at home for when I don't have any time. And I'll get a 10-minute workout at home, in and out, and I'm done. At least I do something instead of doing nothing. If it's cold outside, if it's raining outside, if I'm running out of time, if I just feel like I gotta blow off steam, I'll come down here in my basement and I'll do something. On this side of the camera, I have a whole bunch of bikes that I can get on top of and just hit the road. I can put a pair of sneakers on and run. So I can do a couple different things, but that's the bandwidth that I have because I know I can deploy it. I'm not to the experience and tolerability as I was in my 20s. That's okay. I don't expect that. However, if I trained hard enough, I could probably match some of the stuff I did in my 20s. I'm at almost the same body fat analysis as before, and it's just something that's cool that I'm working on. I don't expect to carry this for a long time. I just have to hold myself in a level of being in shape to make it to Everest Base Camp, which I was hoping to do by 2022. Even if I don't make it to Everest Base Camp, it made me continue on and continue training. And this is what I want you guys to do, is to have the inspiration and the understanding of why you should invest in a trainer, in a gym, in caloric deficits. One of the most important parts of exercise is recovery. You always have to plan that in your formula for getting to your peak. So during my workouts annually, since probably 15 years ago, already assuming I'd hit Everest Base Camp by the time I turned 60, I'd always have a part of the year where I would take it easy. In my undulating periodization, I would take it easy after hitting a max lift or a max hike. So usually in August, when my birthday hits, I'll hit 14,000 feet by taking a group with me to Colorado. My typical example of a recovery is going to be when I exercise and lift heavy, like a 1-rep max. I usually take about a week to recover. That means I'll take it easy for a week. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to just sit on the couch for a week. I just take it easy with my lifts. Or I'll cross-train with some cardiovascular fitness, or I'll do yoga. As far as a 30,000-foot view of the exercises, when I take people to excursions in Colorado, where I hit 14,000 feet, that's a strain. And this last August, I took 3 younger guys with me to 14,000 feet, and they kicked my ass. I used the excuse that I was older, but that was tough. And I had to recover over the course of 2 weeks following. In fact, 3 weeks. In fact, it took me so long to recover from that hike, those 2 hikes that we did, that I thought I had heart failure. So I had to get an echocardiogram from one of my friends at Bright Light Imaging. Thank you, Bright Light. I remember what I did, and I won't do that again. In fact, my remedy for that event that I went through and the tough recovery is that I have to do more endurance work. I have to do more running, which I don't like, but I'm going to have to do it and adapt to it if I want to be a better, well-rounded 60-year-old athlete. And this is where it's also important during the recovery phase to allow decreased activity. I don't think that you just pull back on all activity. Just decreased activity would mean relative rest. And it's up to your trainer, your physical therapist, or your doctor to declare what is relative rest for you. In addition to improving the calories, allowing more flexibility, not hitting deficits so much. Speaking of the building blocks, it doesn't mean that you go into a caloric abundance. It just means that you ease up on the caloric deficits that you are maintaining during the cutting phase. A lot of my bodybuilders will comprehend this in the form of a cutting phase and a bulking phase. And that's when you either cut by doing a caloric deficit, when you're trying to get lean, And during that time, you don't really want performance, you don't want strength, you just want to burn fat and keep muscle or build muscle. A lot of my athletes will resonate with these concepts as cutting phase and bulking phase. Cutting phase is when a bodybuilder wants to maintain muscle bulk, but cut fat away. And that usually means caloric deficit, high repetitions, same strength. Bulking phase is when you put in more protein typically, and you go for hypertrophy or muscle gains. During cutting phases, most bodybuilders will go through high repetition, low weight. That way you can push a lot of repetitions out and drive muscle, but yet get a burn out of it, meaning a cardiovascular burn. During a bulking phase, you'll decrease the repetitions, meaning the amount of repetitions you do per set. You'll still keep it to about 3 to 4 sets total per body part, but then you'll increase the weight so that you're trying to gain hypertrophy. So typically, if I was to try to gain hypertrophy or muscle size, you want to overstimulate those actin and myosin fibers as much as possible without tearing them. And you'll try to put on as much weight as you can tolerate. Typically, it's called a 1 rep max. And you'll build up to 1 rep max where you use form and you just hit the max. And that will be essentially moving to failure. Most of us that exercise with resistance weights will know something called 1 rep max. 1 repetition maximum lift involves lifting with proper form to your max. And it doesn't happen all the time. I like to cycle it about every 3 months. I think that's very conservative, but it also keeps my guys out of injury. And it's more probably for beginners. Having a client do a maximum lift with proper form and to the point of fatigue will get them to challenge as many actin and myosin filaments as possible. When you call in more muscle fibers to a certain area, say shoulders or pecs or lats or legs, when you call in a lot of fibers all at the same time, not only will you gain a lot of strength and be able to lift the most you can with proper form, you'll also be able to strain the muscle as best as possible. And when you strain it, you cause a hormesis to occur. Hormesis is when you challenge an organ and the organ builds up tolerance to the challenge so it works better the next time. When you challenge the brain with more thoughts, more ideas, more calming practice, more meditation, it grows. It's called neuroplasticity. When you do that with the muscle, it actually gets to be more efficient. It grows to be able to tolerate more lift later on, or it becomes more enduring so that it can go till 80 to 90 years of age doing the same things all the time versus stopping at the age of 60 and saying, okay, give me knee replacement or get me a walker. So we don't want that. And that's why we try to challenge. You don't have to do this kind of lifting. You can do Jack LaLanne body weight exercises. You can do jumping jacks, calisthenics. So don't be turned off if your doctor or your trainer says, we're going to entertain resistance exercise now, or I'm going to take you to the machines. I think a lot of people that aren't trained in resistance, they have a terrible apprehension on using machines in the gym. But you don't have to do that in the gym. You can have things designed for you. I made this rack on my own using 4x4s, and I just put it in my basement, and it still holds up these Olympic weights well. So I didn't want to spend the money on a metal rack, and this is fine for me. I bought these weights during COVID from Play It Again Sports. They were used, good enough. And I've made crash plates down below, which you can't see. I've made other weights that are just jimmy rigged so I can use them to my advantage. So even though it looks nasty, it serves my purpose. Now, I don't use these things, and I have a treadmill upstairs just in case, but I hate it because it's really boring and it faces a window that looks out into my backyard, which is a lake, which is really cool. But I try to avoid it because I know it's boring and it resonates with me as far as being boring. So if I get on it, I think boredom, and in a pinch, it's fine. But for my only exercise, that's not going to sustain me. Like you, I have to have my go-tos and my rescue. So I'm nothing special. I have the same challenges as you. I've navigated through in the last 45 years to try to figure out what settles me or what serves me. And it's never too late, even if you're not an athlete, even if you didn't participate in track and field or weights or a bodybuilder. I never want you to be like me. I want you to be what you're supposed to be, but maximize on it. Be the best you can be and express your best level of performance without medicines and surgeries if you can. I think you have it in you, but it might take a little bit of unlocking of secret passageways and codes to make it come out. And yeah, you're going to have some bad days, but you're also going to recover and you'll be stronger than before, but you do have to invest. And this is what I'm trying to get across. The entire tutorial is just to support you guys in trying to launch you into stardom and a different lifestyle. If you have a coach locally that has served you well, whether it's a psychologist, a trainer, a nutritionist, please put them down below and share it with everybody else that watches these videos. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with other people who might be on the fence with trying to figure out lifestyle. Thank you so much for watching up to this point in time. Hopefully this helped you. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you at the next video.